Hey there, it's David Spondia with Brand Rocket. Welcome back to Google Ads for Cardiology. So we're going to talk about something really, really important today called conversion tracking, and that is measuring success, right? So if you think about your website, how do you measure success? So there's a bunch of different touch points on any website. Points of interactivity, whether it's sending an email or booking an appointment. It could be downloading maybe a resource. There's a lot of different things that we can find on different cardiologist websites that need to be tracked. And it is absolutely essential. And you can see here downloads, form submissions, phone calls, book an appointment, email links. Those are the main ones, right? So we're going to talk about that today, and we're going to talk about why this is so important. So measuring success. In the old days of Google Ads, it was as simple as like you can't manage what you're not measuring, right? So you had to know exactly what was going on in your account. And that was just basic conversions, right? So today, Google Ads works differently. Of course, knowing what's converting and what's not is super important, but Google Ads today is even more advanced, and it takes those success signals, anything that adds value to your cardiology practice, needs to be reported back to Google so Google can use those success signals to actually find more people that align with the services that you offer in your practice. So think about the way Google Ads works today. It works one of two ways, generally, in general terms. Either we're bidding for keywords to dominate page position, or we are harnessing the power of smart bidding, the algorithmic learning that happens within Google Ads, to be able to put our ads in front of people that have been actively searching for services that you offer, even if they don't even know what those services are. So it's really important that we get those success signals tracking correctly. And it's important that we're getting those over to Google Ads so that we can harness the power of algorithmic learning and optimization to be able to use all those different campaign types, okay? In terms of general KPIs, these key performance indicators, we're looking at conversions. And there's two ways to look at conversions. We'll talk more about that later. It could be conversions based off of when the ad was shown, or it could be conversions based off of when somebody took action. So there's a big gap of time between those two events. And it can really skew your numbers if you don't understand that. A lot of times if somebody converts just a standard conversion, it happens much later. Maybe they're still in consideration mode. So there could be a lag time, and it can skew your data, or at least it looks like it's skewed. It's not really skewed. It's reporting correctly. There's another one called conversion by time that actually looks at it at the time that somebody actually converts versus when the ad was shown. So conversions are really, really important to be able to see that data. Conversion rate is a percentage. That's also really important as well. Like how, out of all the clicks that you're getting, what percentage of the time are they actually converting? And again, that conversion can be a form submission or a phone call or a booking. There's a lot of different conversion events, right? But we need to see that conversion rate, because if all of a sudden we look at the reports, conversion rate is down, does that mean we have a traffic issue, a quality of click issue? Does that mean we have an issue on the website? If conversion rate is down, it could be post-click, right? It could be maybe something's not working correctly on the website, or a web developer has added something that adds extra points of friction that prevents somebody from easily submitting a form. You know, it could be as easy as like CAPTCHA, right? Those annoying CAPTCHA things that come up, they're like, click all of the pictures that have a sidewalk or a fire hydrant or whatever. Like things like that can slow down the process of converting somebody. So conversion rate is really, really important to look at. Cost per conversion, super important as well, because we use that particular metric to say, okay, is Google Ads profitable for the cardiologist, the practice, or are we wasting money? So we need to know our cost per conversion. It's also called cost per acquisition, or CPA. CPA is used almost exclusively in Google Ads. So we have bidding methodologies called like target CPA, or restrictors rather, I should say, where we're targeting a certain level of cost per acquisition. So conversion rate, conversions, really, really important to get that measurement correct. Now I'm going to take a look at a couple of websites here just to give you an example of the different things that you might consider for measuring conversions within your own practice. And we will start with this particular practice. I just did a random search. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, so I did a random search. I found Biltmore Cardiology. Let's take a look at their website. What are we going to measure on this website that represents value to the practice? Well, front and center, we have a phone number up here, right? So this is definitely needs to be measured. Google has built-in phone tracking, which works as long as you're just tracking one number. If you're trying to track multiple numbers, you really need to use a third-party tool, something like Call Tracking Metrics or CallRail. If you have any questions on that, just hit me up because there's resell. I resell CallRail, but Call Tracking Metrics is amazing as well. Allows you to be able to have multiple phone numbers that are trackable, so you can measure the impact of your marketing. You could have some phone numbers for Google Ads. You can have phone numbers for email marketing, phone numbers for social. Being able to see exactly what is generating value to the practice by proper measurement of phone calls. So if we look at Biltmore Cardiology in particular, because they have a lot of locations, when we get into looking at finding a provider, I believe that's where it is. Let's take a look here. Actually, locations, I think, is where I noticed it. Let's take a look there. So you can see, okay, maybe not. So we're just going to go right back into here. If I need to contact a doctor, for example, you can see down here, there's a lot of different doctors. Call now, book an appointment, call now. These are all conversions that need to be tracked. And a lot of these, because they're different, well, this is all Biltmore, but you can see there's a lot of different locations that have different phone numbers. In this particular case, we would use a tool like CallRail or Call Tracking Metrics. Now, if you just have a single phone number, then you can use the built-in call tracking from Google. And what happens is that when somebody clicks on an ad, that phone number swaps out for a Google tracking number that has an identical area code. And it allows you to measure things like how long the phone call or the duration of the phone call. It will actually pull in the phone number. With those other third-party services, by the way, a lot of them have an option to be HIPAA compliant. And then you're able to go in and review the actual phone call. So that's a common disconnect between conversions and reality, is being able to go in and say, okay, what did these calls sound like? Was this an actual conversion for the practice? Or did somebody call maybe looking for another practice, or they had questions about services that were not even provided by the practice? So it's really important to be able to measure those phone calls and monitor the phone calls from a quality perspective as well. So phone calls, without a doubt. What else would we be measuring? Booking online. Okay, so they have a booking ability to book an appointment. This is the type of thing right here. This event is something that we would need to track as well. Now I can see that they are using Athena for this particular booking software. So it would get configured in a way that conversion would be measured through that external IP address. Not to get into the weeds, but once you go to a different URL like Athena, there's cross-domain tracking that has to happen. A lot of times we do that in GA4, Google Analytics 4, to be able to measure that event of somebody booking an appointment as though it's a single session. So they go through the booking process. Usually they get sent back to the website, thank you page, boom, it gets marked as a conversion. So really important to measure booking as well, right? So calls, booking, contact forms. I didn't see a contact form on this one, but anytime there was a point of action or an event that represents success for the practice, it absolutely has to be measured, because those are signals that get fed back into Google Ads that allow your advertising to perform much better than just standard measurement, right? And a lot of times when I say standard measurement, it could be somebody just measuring a form submission, but there's a lot of different ways that somebody can contact you, and they all need to be measured. On this particular one, Tri-City Cardiology, we have two different phone numbers that would need to be measured. I'm actually going through this for the first time. So we have appointments that would need to be measured. There's a contact list. Most likely so here's schedule an appointment again, probably goes to the same spot. There's ever an email. So these different phone numbers would need to be measured. If there's a way for somebody to click on an email, that can be measured as well. So let's just go through some of the, okay, here's Phoenix Heart, Vein, and Vascular. So here's a way to contact, request an appointment. So you kind of see the same thing over and over again, right? But all of those points of entry where somebody can submit information or contact you absolutely needs to be accounted for a few very important reasons that I'm going to talk about here shortly. All right. So one way, if you're wondering, hey, do I even have this in place today? The way that it would work, there's different ways it can work. It can work through Google Analytics 4. It can also work through the Google Tag Manager. The Google Tag Manager is a free piece of software from Google. It lives in the cloud. It allows you to run individual snippets of code for tracking and measurement. Highly recommend it. That's how we configure most of the conversion tracking through the Google Tag Manager. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of Google Tag Manager in this video because it's really its own video. In fact, I've done videos on Google Tag Manager, so be sure to search the channel. And there's a ton of videos out there on YouTube that you can search as well. If you're curious to know if your Tag Manager is running or not, there's a tool called the Google Tag Assistant. This is located at tagassistant.google.com and allows you to be able to add your domain. You just simply put your domain in, you connect, and it will show you what's actually configured. So I'm going to do that for Phoenix Heart. Let's just do an example here. I'm going to go into the Google Tag Assistant. I'm going to submit phoenixheart.com. We're going to connect. It's going to say connecting to this window. It makes a connection with the website. Then I can go back over into this tool and see, okay, what is actually running? In this particular case, I can see that GA4 is running. You can see it by this tag right here. So they don't have the Google Tag Manager, but they do have GA4. Let's try another one. Let's go over to, let me see, where are, let's take a look at, we're going to take a look at Tri-City Cardiology to see what they're running. We're going to go back over to the Tag Manager. I'm going to say stop debugging. I'm going to X this out, stop debugging, add a domain. I'm going to add this other domain for Tri-City, and we're going to see what's running here. Okay, and again, you can do this for your own domain in case you have no idea like what's running behind the scenes, what tags are firing on your website. And in this particular case, I can see that GTM, Google Tag Manager, is running for this cardiologist, okay? So they're already set up behind the scenes with the Google Tag Manager, and then they also have a Google tag that's running as well. Okay, so this is, from a setup perspective, this is what you definitely want to do. You could do it one of two ways, directly through the Google tag, and a lot of times that's in conjunction with GA4, Google Analytics 4. The preferred way, in my opinion, is to run everything through the Google Tag Manager. It makes it so much easier, and you can run all of your tags, including even like the Meta Pixel for Facebook and Instagram advertising, or any other channels that you might be interested in. If you're doing Microsoft advertising, if you're doing anything, I don't know why you would, but maybe LinkedIn or any of their Reddit, or any other advertising vehicle, digital advertising vehicle. There's a ton of tags that are available that are built into Google Tag Manager, and it just makes it so much easier to configure. Okay, if this is something that's out of your wheelhouse and you need help with, we definitely do this stuff all day long. Okay, so I've said that before. If you'd rather just focus on the practice, bringing in patients, quality and servicing patients with quality care. Google Ads is full of these little detail items that can be quite advanced and time consuming to set up. So feel free to, reach out if you ever have any questions. Okay. And I'll give that contact information again here shortly. So getting back to what we're saying, measurement is absolutely vital. So you have to make sure you're measuring your conversions. And again, conversions can be form submissions, booking, phone calls, resources that are downloaded, email clicks. All of that stuff are success signals that get fed into Google. It's for algorithmic learning so that we can harness the power of different bidding methodologies, such as maximize conversions, maximize conversion value if we're bringing revenue back into Google Ads, and a whole bunch of other options that open up. But measurement is absolutely key. And for this reason. So conversion tracking gone bad. What happens if you do not have conversion tracking properly configured? And this is what I see over and over again with the countless audits that I do on these accounts, okay? If conversion tracking is misconfigured, let's say conversion tracking is set up on page view. So somebody just views a page for one of your cardiovascular services and it gets counted as a conversion. You're overinflating the conversion numbers. It doesn't represent somebody who's truly interested in your service. They could just be looking at the website. Maybe they have no intent of ever contacting you, and you're feeding bad information into Google, and Google's learning off of bad information. So these situations are compounding. They can actually affect to the account's detriment on a myriad of levels. So leads to poor budget decisions. So if you don't know exactly what's converting and what's adding value to your practice, your numbers could look a lot better or a lot worse. And it's really hard to make smart decisions if you have that misconfiguration. It leads to it wastes valuable company funds, right? So if you're thinking you're driving conversions and you truly are not, then you're adding budget to something that you shouldn't be adding budget to. So big one there. It wastes time and resources. So if you're measuring conversions on something that, let's say that a keyword that's not even what you should be bidding on, it's going to result not only in expense, but also time. So those phone calls are going to come in. Somebody has to answer the call. It's not going to be the right person, and you're just wasting a bunch of time and money. Again, training algorithm with bad data. So I touched on this before, but if we're sending data in that's bad, we're going to get data out that's bad as well. So garbage in, garbage out. And the worst part of that is you start to train the algorithm on something that doesn't matter, and it goes off. It's like a dog playing fetch or something. It goes off in the wrong direction, right? It's supposed to go in one direction, and it's off on its own on a tangent. It's lost in the weeds. You absolutely have to make sure that you have proper conversion tracking so that your data is solid and you are not training the algorithm to go off on a tangent and start focusing on conversions that really don't matter to the practice. The inability to scale success is another big one. So if you're not focused on the true keywords that are driving value and revenue and growth for your practice, you can't scale anything, right? The whole thing with Google Ads is to identify what is really bringing in that quality traffic, the quality clicks that you can then totally maximize and beat the competition on. Own the top of the search for those keywords, right? So if you don't have proper conversion tracking, you have no idea what to scale. So really important. It damages our ROI for sure. So if we're tracking something that's incorrect and we look at numbers, if we're looking at, ROAS, for example, return on ad spend, and we have no idea what the return is because we're not tracking it correctly, that's bad news for the account. If we are measuring the wrong conversions and we're looking for a cost per acquisition, well, we have bad data in, bad data out. We have no idea what our true cost per acquisition is for those very distinct keywords. Okay, so these are compounding errors that could really mess up an account. So it's really important to get this right. And then, of course, it strengthens competitors, because if you're not doing this right, and your competitor they are pouring money into something that they know is profitable. They know that this is a growth mechanism. And meanwhile, you're squandering and you're wasting your ad spend because you have no idea what's going on in your messy, misconfigured account. So conversion tracking, really, really important. In the next section of this video, we're going to talk a little bit about how do we set up these conversions. Now, I'm not going to go through it all because the interface changes on a regular basis within Google Ads. And quite frankly, there's probably 1,000 videos on YouTube that covers this already. But I'm going to take you through the basics of creating an actual conversion so you can see how that looks within Google Ads. Although we're not going to go deep, deep, deep into the weeds on this. All right, so let's get into it. Okay, so let's go through the process of setting up a conversion. All right, so we're not going to go all the way through it, but I'm going to show you the basics and talk you through what the next steps would be, because there's probably 500 different next steps that could, depending on your booking software, depending on your form software, depending on your website configuration. Pretty much every setup is different, and it would take 10 hours to go through every single one of them, right? But I'll take you through the kind of the high level steps of setting this up. On the Google side, we can actually create a conversion action. I'm going to take you through that, how to create a conversion action. So that is a trigger that happens whenever whenever there's an event that executes on your website. Now, an event could be like a form submission. It can be a phone call. It can be a booking, right, for your practice. So just think of those, something that might trigger with something based off of what somebody is doing on your website. Okay, so we are going to create a conversion action that gets triggered by any of those or all of those actually events. And you'll want to set up one conversion action for every single event. We're going to pretend like we're setting up a conversion action for a form, a submission form in this particular example. And then I'll talk more about like once we set this up, I'll take you through the concept of how you apply this to different events that might happen on your website. All right, so we're going to create a conversion action. This is a test account that I have for Brand Rocket. We are going to pretend that we are doing a website conversion. Okay, so this would be a web form. If we're tracking phone calls, and you will want to do that for sure. If we're doing phone calls, you'll go through this and you'll set up two different call conversions. One for the phone calls from your ad unit. So think about when somebody's searching on their mobile phone and they get your listing and how they can just click and place a phone call. So you'll want to do calls from ads, and then also you'll want to track calls from website. I'm not going to get into this one because again, it entails setting up the conversion here and then creating a tag and then a trigger in the Google Tag Manager. So in fact, I'll go through that actually, but I'm not going to go into the Google Tag Manager portion just because there's a ton of videos out there that already cover that. I've covered it in the channel before. Make sure you just do a search for Google Tag Manager here in Brand Rocket within YouTube, and you'll be able to find a video on how to do that. But we'll go through both of them, okay? So the first one is a website. It will ask you for the website domain. At least now it does. This stuff can change, right? So I'm just going to jump over to Built More Cardiology. What I'm doing is I'm copying the URL from Built More Cardiology. I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to paste it in. Google does a scan to see what's going on behind the scenes. It's going to say create conversion actions for web and app events. I don't do this. I actually skip down here and say add a conversion action manually. Okay, so we have the category that we have to choose, and you have your standard like purchase, add to cart. These are e-commerce type conversions, so just ignore those. Most likely down here we're talking about leads, right? So we're talking about like contact or submit lead form. If you're doing a conversion action for your booking software, you'll want to do book appointment. These are all categories to keep everything structured in your account. So for what we're doing here in this example, we're just going to say contact. Okay, so conversion name, I'm going to say form submission cardiology. All right, test. All right. If you know the value of your conversions, and I highly recommend that you do some work on this to figure out what does a patient represent to you in terms of lifetime value. It's really, really helpful if you have that information. It's rare in my conversations that somebody does, and we're going to talk more about that in a future video. But if you know what a patient, or at least a lead coming in, let's work backwards. So we're going to figure out what is a patient worth, okay? And then what is the conversion rate for the leads that come into your practice? If you can figure out what your conversion rate is, then you can figure out, what is, and your patient lifetime value. Then you can use those two numbers to figure out, okay, what is a conversion worth to me? If there's a patient sitting on the shelf and I could buy that patient, how much am I willing to spend to bring that person into my practice? What compared to the value that I receive over time? Okay. So we're going to say use the same value on each conversion. I'm going to say just a random number, that a patient is where I'd be willing to spend $100. Okay. So we will, and this is something that, again, you can change it at any time. A lot of times I just use a random number in the beginning, and then we work out the details. We do the calculations, and we fill this in. Different values for each conversion. That's more on e-commerce when people are buying different types of items on the website. Okay. Or you could just use no value. The reason you want to use a value, because at some point you might want to use target ROAS bidding. So ROAS is return on ad spend, and you can't get the return fed into the algorithm unless you have a revenue component coming back in. So something to think about there. Count every or one. So if you do every, if they submit the form over and over again, it's going to count conversions multiple times. So you want to just say one, just to limit it so it can't do that. Your click-through conversion window is your window of time between when somebody sees your ad and clicks on it and when they take action. So if your conversion window is too short, and think about the consideration stage for somebody that is looking for some type of procedure related to cardiology, if that's a long, drawn-out decision-making process and you want to go as wide as possible on the window, so I would recommend actually 90 days. That's as far as you can go, okay? So if somebody clicks on an ad, they contemplate, they hem and they haw, they're like, should I do this? And then month 4, or even on, even if it's like maybe 91 days later, they decide to fill out a form or place a phone call, that person does not get counted. So it has to be within that 3-month window. 3 months is as wide as you can do it. So definitely go with 90 days on that, because a lot of these decisions are big decisions, unless it's an emergent situation where somebody has to get a procedure done quickly. But 90 days gives you that flexibility, okay? So I'm not sure why that zoomed out. I zoomed in like that. Let me zoom back out. All right, engage view conversion window. It's more about engagement. Just leave it at 3 days. View through conversion window. Just leave it at a day. Data-driven attribution. This is how Google determines how to spread the credit around in terms of like what drove that conversion. Data-driven uses a bunch of different data points to determine how those conversions came into your account. So if somebody came through like a display ad or maybe YouTube video, or they came in through Facebook or whatever, it doesn't take full credit. In fact, it'll give like a decimal point to the conversion number. I highly recommend just using data-driven. It works very well. Another option is last click, giving full credit to whatever that last click was that drove that conversion into Google Ads. But data-driven is recommended. All these others that used to exist have been expired, so you really only have 2 choices now. Enhanced conversions are something else that you need to think about. You don't have to do it right away, but Google's going to pester you about it constantly. Enhanced conversions are just a way to augment conversion data. So if your form is submitting first name, last name, phone number, email address, things of that nature, these are more matching points that Google can use to be able to enrich in that data and find more people like that person. So it is recommended that you do it. You don't have to do it in the beginning, but it's recommended that you do it, and do it through Google Tag. It says manage through Google Tag. It will try to do it automatically. And if it can't do it automatically, you're going to get a message, and there's other ways to do it for sure, even through the Google Tag Manager. So go ahead and just, accept what's defaulted here, and then hopefully Google can do that automatically. Enable enhanced CPC. This is weird because enhanced CPC doesn't exist anymore. I don't know why it's pre-checked. I would just uncheck that. Enhanced CPC used to give Google the freedom and flexibility to move your bids up and down by a certain percentage, depending on the commercial intent behind somebody searching. But that's gone away. So it's interesting that it's still there. So we're just going to click done. All right. So we are going to save and continue. And now we are going to get this other page where we have 3 options. We can set up a Google tag. A lot of people do it that way. Email instructions to Webmaster, or use Google Tag Manager. Okay, so again, here I recommend, using Google Tag Manager. And you can see there's a conversion ID, and then there's a form submission cardiology test. that has this particular alphanumeric character here as well, okay? So in the Google Tag Manager, again, this is not a video about the GTM, but in the Google Tag Manager, when you set up your conversion tracking for a form, think about the way that forms work, okay? Forms will submit and then go to a thank you page. Okay, that's one option. That's kind of the old school way of doing it, but it's still very reliable. And if they go to a thank you page, so your website /thanks, we'll just say that, right? Then Google Tag Manager needs to be set up so that whenever that happens, that a tag for Google Ads conversion tracking, which exists, it actually exists. It's pre-made for you. It lives in the Google Tag Manager. That particular tag gets configured with the trigger, and that trigger happens when somebody goes to the thank you page. So they submit the form, goes to the thank you page. It triggers that event, which is the Google Ads conversion tracking, and it gets this conversion ID and this conversion label get added to that trigger, or I'm sorry, get added to the tag that gets triggered at that event going to the thank you page. And that's how it connects between Google Tag Manager and Google Ads. Now, there's other ways to do it. Like a lot of form software will just submit dynamically. It doesn't go anywhere, and it just puts up a message that says thank you. Well, I keep saying thank you. Thank you. And then so there's different ways to track that as well. So if it's a pop-up window, sometimes there could be a CSS selector as part of the code that's unique to that pop-up window that you can trigger on that. There's things that happen on the data layer, not to get in the weeds, that can happen with the website. On the data layer that you can actually, there's a whole bunch of different variables that you can look at. And like I said, every single implementation is different. That's why I can't go into this. But if your form submits dynamically, then there's ways to capture that as well. And again, I'll say it a million times during this video, during this series, but we do this stuff all day long, right? So the very first thing we do when we manage an account or set up an account is set up conversion tracking. Very first thing, because it has to be 100% accurate for all the reasons I said prior, okay? So just remember, we're here to help, and I'll give you the slide with that information here shortly. All right, so we created one. There's a lot of tests here, but we created one. You can see it here, form submission cardiology test. Okay, so this is inactive because the Google Tag Manager would have to be configured to fire that on the thank you page or some event that might happen when that form is submitted. All right, we're going to do another conversion action. We are going to do a phone call. All right, and we're going to say, in this case, calls from ads. Using calls from ads using call assets or call ads. Yeah, so this is what we want to do for the phone number that shows up in your ad. All right, so I'm going to go over and grab, we're playing pretend again, right? So I'm going to go over here and grab this phone number. I'm just going to copy it. And we're going to continue. And I'm going to say calls from ads, cardiology test. All right. I'm going to say 100. Once, call length. So the call has to last a certain amount of time for it to be counted as a conversion. In the very beginning, if you have a new account, I would set that low just so you get some conversions into your account. And then you have to determine like how long that is. If there's a voicemail system, if they call and they're like in a voicemail system that lasts longer than 30 seconds, then don't do this. Okay. So you have to make that individual choice as to how long a call needs to happen before it's counted as a conversion. So 30 seconds generally is where we start. Click through conversion window. So again, this is the same thing that we looked at before. In this case, we can only go 60 days. So go ahead and pick that. Data-driven attribution again, create and continue. Okay. So now we're going to go to the next page. And this is calls from ads. So it's very simple. It's internal to Google Ads. And you don't have to do anything else. You're done. Okay. So we're going to go done. And that's it. Now, if we're going to create a different call conversion, let's say we wanted to track calls from the website, okay, then it's going to look different, right? So we're going to go through conversion name. We're going to do all this other stuff, but now we're adding destination phone number, display phone number. We're adding the same thing like the seconds, the duration for it to count as a conversion. We hit create and continue, and then we get those two pieces, those two variables that get passed over into the Google Tag Manager, and then you set it up in the Google Tag Manager for calls on website conversions, okay? So I'm not going to go into that because that's another 5 minutes, and frankly, I'm already at 35 minutes on this video, right? So, that's it, kind of in a nutshell, how to set up conversions. Hopefully, I'm pointing you in the direction where you can take it from here, for sure. But once again, getting back over into the conversion tracking details in the slides, this gives you the ability to measure conversions, conversion rate, cost per conversion. Really, really important stuff for sure. I talked about what happens when conversion tracking does not work, and you don't want this to happen for sure because you're going to waste a lot of money and a lot of time, and you won't be able to optimize your campaigns at all, okay? So I said I was going to mention this. One quick commercial. Here to help. Always here to help. Do this stuff day in, day out, in my sleep. And if you're doing it new, there's a lot of details here and a lot of different ways that you can mess up an account. Not to, present scare tactics, but it's the reality of Google Ads. These things have to be set up correctly. Otherwise, Google Ads will go off the cliff and start spending money recklessly, and you definitely don't want that. So if you need help with conversion tracking or setting up your campaigns the correct way, and everything that we're going to talk about as we go through these videos, just give us a call, okay? And actually, the best way to do that is to go to brandrocket.net/schedule, and that puts you on the schedule, sends a Zoom link. We set up a time for, 15-minute discussion, and then we're off to the races. All right, so thank you again for hanging in on this rather long video, but it is important. Conversion tracking is the most important topic, which is why we start with that in the first real video of this series. All right. Thanks again. We'll talk soon.